I just want to introduce you to the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. This is the GBIF homepage at gbif.org. As you can see, it houses 2.5 billion species occurrence records. These are observations of species from all over the world. Those are in 89,000 data sets. GBIF involves 2,121 publishing institutions around the world. And in a recent development, it's now possible to track GBIF data into peer-reviewed publications using digital object identifiers. So if we take a look at the information about GBIF is an intergovernmental network. It was established in 2001 based on a 1999 recommendation from the OECD. So GBIF is interesting when compared with, say, INSDC or GISAID, because it was established on a recommendation from OECD, and it is an intergovernmental network that consists of 44 voting member countries called participants, governments, 20 associate country participants, and then there are other participants which can be things like public collections in different parts of the world and 2,177 publishers. Each of the country's participants has a node which has responsibilities under a memorandum of understanding. So what we see here, and what interests us, I think, for digital sequence information, is we have a clear and transparent governance mechanism. Just to take a look at a little bit at how the data in GBIF is organized, you can identify data by country, as we see here for Colombia, which is, the name is CO, is the country code. There are 25 million species occurrences recorded for Colombia. There are 4,382 data sets. 47 countries and organizations from those countries are contributing data about biodiversity in Colombia from 673 publishers. Let's take a look at Venezuela. That has 3.8 million occurrence records. 47 countries are contributing from 177 publishers. Peru, go down the Andean spine, is 8.3 million records. Brazil has a pretty massive 29 million biodiversity records in. So the important point to remember here, I think, is that this is an intergovernmental network which has a clear governance structure under a governing body that meets pretty much every year, consisting of countries who are members, associate countries, and participating organizations who take decisions. We can also dig into the data about an individual country. So here we have data, the 25 million records for Colombia. We can see information on the main kingdoms, animals, plants, fungi, where these species occurrence records are found. We can see some kind of information about trends in the deposit of information over time, as we see here, whether these are human observations, machine observations, fossils, and so on. And notice here this information about licenses, which I will come on to in a moment. Then we have who the publishing country is. Most of the Colombia data is coming from Colombia. What the different data sets are. Most of the data in GBIF is actually, really, a lot of it is about birds, because people are very keen on birds. Then we get, quite a lot of summary statistics that are available from GBIF, and this is not available at present from entities such as INSDC for sequence related data. Okay, so we can start to get into some of the issues around licenses with GBIF by returning to the home page and clicking on occurrences. This gives us an overview of the entire species occurrence records from GBIF, which is the 2.5 billion records. Now, in 20 members of BIF realised that the situation around the terms and conditions of the use of GBIF data were becoming a bit unwieldy, because both for publishers and in particular for users, because there was somewhere in the region of maybe 700 different sets of terms and conditions across the hundreds of millions of records at the time, requiring basically contradictory terms and conditions for uses of data from different sources. So the solution that the GBIF board came up to this was a round of public consultation with government and scientific participants, which settled through consultation on the adoption of 3 Creative Commons licenses. And if we just click on the occurrences here, we can see that all 2.5 billion species occurrence records at GBIF are under one of 3 licenses. In fact, you are not allowed to submit data to GBIF that does not have one of these 3 licenses. The 3 licenses are: any use is permitted provided there is attribution, which is CC BY for Creative Commons by attribution. Then the second license is CC BY NC, which stands for Creative Commons by attribution, non-commercial use only. And finally, CC0. CC0 is not as such a license, it is an explicit surrender or entry of records into the public domain, which is CC0. There are no rights or obligations. It's a surrender of any rights. And we can see from the records that the most popular license by far is CC BY attribution, which is 1.9 billion records. This has changed over time, actually. The second most popular license is CC BY attribution for non-commercial use. And finally, we have the explicit waiver to the public domain of CC0 with 286 million records. What's nice about GBIF's approach is that you can do quite a lot of things here. For example, we could look at the individual records for Colombia by going down to the country or area tab, and you can see that the figures are just here. So for Colombia, we have 18 million records that are under a CC BY attribution license, 4.2 million that are non-commercial use and attribution, and 1.8 million that are for the waiver to the public domain. So you can really kind of dig down into this data and get quite a lot of information. You can just search for your individual country. We can also look by publisher, and this is where we get to sequence data. So there are 2 main publishers of sequence metadata. So this is data about the locations and species for sequences that occur in INSDC databases. That's a data set from the European Nucleotide Archive with 7.1 million species occurrence records linked to sequences, and the International Barcode of Life Consortium with 9.7 million, which gives us a total of 16.8 million species records that are associated with sequences. We can see that all of those records are under license, and they're all under the CC BY license. So whereas the INSDC has adopted a policy of not allowing any kind of terms and conditions, licenses or so on for sequence records held in INSDC databases, in this case, they require the use of an attribution license. So in the case of EMBL, which is representing that consortium, for 7.1 million species occurrence records. Now, what I think is particularly relevant for Indigenous peoples and the wider discussion on digital sequence information is that this system works 7 days a week without any controversy whatsoever. So it is an example of an intergovernmental body that engaged in a consultation process, decided on the use of a set of standardized open licenses, implemented that approach with its international network, and there has been zero controversy to date since 2016 when this was implemented about the use of licenses. This therefore provides a model for governance, how international governance can be arranged across multiple countries with data, and for the application of specific tools such as licenses. So if we wanted to really kind of start digging into the detail of these 16 million records related to sequences, we can start to kind of download the data and kind of explore it for particular countries. So in one case, I located these records for this frog, and we can see that in the INSDC sequences, we have 19 records that come from Venezuela, Brazil, and Colombia. For what is an Amazonian species, it might have a wider distribution than Amazonia. For Brazil, we see here that we have information about the locality being in Ceguera, in Cerro Otana, in Amazonas, which is an area where the Watana or Piaroa, with whom I used to live and work, live. If we look in Colombia, we get location data here, which I'm assuming is somewhere in Amazonia, although it's a bit less in the Valpes, and we'll find similar information for Brazil. So what we can see here is that we can start to kind of dig down into records that are collected for specimens that are collected in indigenous peoples' territories, and we can see here that these are made available under a CC BY or attribution license. So the argument here would be that we could link together the fair and the care principles to say that there would be some form of standardized license that would be specifically visible to indigenous peoples in understanding what is being in making available specimens and sequence data for wider use.